Today, I'm breaking down the 5 evidence-based strategies that I use to make eating a healthy diet consistently super easy. I'm going to share those with you today. I'm simply using behavioral psychology and neuroscience to make it as easy as possible and almost hack my brain instead of having to rely on discipline and willpower. So I'm going to walk through some actionable tips that you can implement today. Also, at a park in Bangkok, and it is beautiful. The first thing is the Pareto Principle, the 80-20 rule. See, this happens when you go on this all or nothing diet. At least it happens to me, where I'll go on this crazy restrictive diet following this perfect plan for like 3 weeks straight, and you get amazing results. But then you see a cookie, or suddenly there's a bunch of free food on the table, and those chicken wings have never looked better than they ever have. And then suddenly you just take one nibble and then boom, it's like 1 turns into 30, and it's like, how did I get here? And it's because when you go on these super restrictive diets and this all or nothing mentality, your brain is like, it's either perfection or it's not. So once you eat that small little nibble of a wing, then your brain is like, oh, we just broke the streak, let's go super hard while we can so that we can be perfect tomorrow again. And that is what causes that emotional eating, that binge eating. Instead of aiming for 100% perfection, you actually just want to aim for 80% consistency. The best diet is a sustainable diet that you can do for the long term, right? I would rather have you eat an 80% healthy diet for the rest of your life rather than doing 100% for 3 weeks, falling off, then 100% for 3 weeks, falling off, and just doing this back and forth. And the best strategy for you here is to incorporate the foods that you love in your diet. So it's like intentionally making your diet 85-90% healthy. What I mean by that, let's say you really love chocolate, right? And if you know the staple foods and what you're supposed to eat throughout the day each week, you can say, okay, I'm going to eat a little bit less of this so that I can eat a little bit of chocolate on Tuesday and Thursday. Or it's like, I'm going to strategically map out my week so that I can eat a burger on Friday because I really love burgers. And suddenly, because you're incorporating those foods that you still love, it doesn't make it feel like this all or nothing game. And that's the key. The second one is all about environmental design. So let me give you an example. If you walk past a bakery every single day and you can see through the window, or maybe you can even smell it, the amazing pastries, the donuts, and it just looks and smells so good. If you walk past that thing every single day, eventually there is going to be a point where you're kind of hungry and it looks really good, or maybe you had a long day and you are just going to cave. And that's what happened to me. I used to live across from a grocery store, and whenever I had a really hard day or I was feeling lonely or whatnot, the Publix that I lived across, as soon as I walked in and looked to the right, there was the most delicious looking desserts you could ever see. And it's like, of course I'm going to cave. And it's like, because it was so accessible, it was so easy to just walk across the street and get those things that weren't very good for me. That is what caused me to not be consistent with my diet. The biggest tip here is actually to get your groceries delivered. Don't even go to the grocery store, because when you go to the grocery store, you are being bombarded with these visually appealing Doritos, cookies, chips, whatever, Oreo, whatever you can think of. There are just these amazing products specifically designed. They are spending millions of dollars on their packaging and making the color look as vibrant as possible so that when you see it, you're like, ooh. If you get your groceries delivered and you're just shopping online, through a screen, like that Lay's bag doesn't really look that good, right? Is that eliminating those things from your environment so that you don't have to make the tough decision using willpower and discipline to say no to all those things that maybe you're not saying no in the moment, but you're like subconsciously saying no, and that affects your decision making over the long term. And what I mean by that is it's all about decision fatigue. And all of these micro decisions of you saying no, 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 by the 100th time of saying no, you're finally going to give in. And so get your groceries delivered. It's not sexy. It makes it super easy to make the right choices, because if you don't buy them at the store, you don't bring them to your home, and then if they're not in your home, it makes it a lot easier to not snack on it, not binge on it, not even have it as an option. The third thing is that people tell you that you need to eat boring, which is totally false, right? Your brain is wired for pleasure and novelty, so you always want to eat something new, keep it fresh, right? And so that's why if you eat the same thing every day, you are going to burn out, you're going to get tired of it, and you're going to be like, and then that's what is going to cause you to want to go out to eat. And so the key here is not to have cheat meals, it's to make your regular meals incorporating variety and enjoyableness to the meals that you already eat in a healthy way, so that you don't even need cheat meals. So instead of changing what you eat, it's about how you prepare it. So if you really like tacos, an easy way to change that is to use a high fiber tortilla, low carb tortilla. You can use leaner meats. Maybe you don't use as much sour cream and cheese. Add more vegetables, and it's the same thing, right? You're still able to eat that taco and get 90% of the 80-90% of the enjoyment, and just making it a healthier version. Same thing with pasta, chickpea pasta. I really like using spaghetti squash. It's almost the same thing with just a fraction of the calories, and making a few substitutions with the sauce that you use, right? You're still eating pasta, but you're just making it in a way that makes it super easy to still enjoy it by being healthy still. So the psychological benefit here is that you're not making it this A or B mentality of like, I can only eat these boring healthy foods, and B is all of these unhealthy foods that are fun. And so instead of making it like this mutually exclusive A or B, it's just like, why not both, right? There's a way that you can get creative with that and do both, so that you don't have to be restricting, and that's when you fall off with your consistency. The fourth is taking care of your sleep. Your life depends on it. I can't even tell you how important this is. Even just 1 or 2 nights of inadequate sleep has crazy effects on your hunger hormones, or your hormones in general. Ghrelin, which is the hormone that stimulates hunger, so it makes you more hungry, and then leptin, which makes you feel more full. Sleep makes you more hungry by increasing ghrelin and decreasing leptin. And also, when you're sleep deprived, right, your brain wants dopamine. It wants to feel good. And so it makes all of those very high dopamine foods that are loaded with sugar and salt and fat, your brain is like, ooh, give me that. I want to feel good, right? And then also, studies prove that sleep deprivation also impacts your prefrontal cortex, which is your brain's, the section of your brain that makes decisions. And so your prefrontal cortex is literally that is like your willpower brain, right? So if that thing is just non-existent because you're not getting enough sleep, it is combined with I'm more hungry, the dopamine foods look better. Like that is just a recipe. That is an absolute recipe for falling off your diet. So do everything that you can to protect your sleep. The last thing is to identify and modify your behavioral triggers. So there is a habit pattern in your brain that causes this emotional and binge eating or falling off of your diet. It goes cue, craving, response, reward. So the cue is that first initial trigger. The craving is then you thinking about that donut or the pizza and thinking about how good it's going to taste. And then the response is you actually eating it, and the reward is the dopamine that you get from it, right? And you go in this cycle, in this loop. And so in order to not start this loop and cycle, you have to know what your cues are. And so overeating isn't random if you are able to identify these patterns starting with the cue, whether it be emotional, situational, social. For an example, if you drink alcohol and you're kind of drunk, that might trigger you to then want to eat that greasy burger or those French fries. Or maybe you're on the couch and you're kind of bored and suddenly you want to grab snacks to do something while you watch TV. For me, I used to follow a bunch of these food channels on Instagram. So whenever I go on Instagram, I'd see all just bombarded with all of these amazing looking foods. And that triggered me. That was my cue to then want to go eat Texas barbecue and all of these other foods, right? Because it looks so yummy. And once I identified, oh my God, this is what's causing this loop to start for me, I unfollowed all those channels. And that made a massive difference. And so the key is to identify your specific triggers. Always ask yourself, what happened right before I ate that donut or that pizza, or what caused me to spiral? What was that specific? It might be a feeling, right? It might be boredom or sad or stressed. It might be a certain situation, a happy hour at work, but it's super important to identify your triggers and cues so that you can be more mindful and potentially eliminate those, right? You can't eliminate everything, but as many as you can to create this environment and this system so that you don't have to rely on this willpower and discipline. So for an example, it might be having the Cheez-Its and the Oreos on the counter. Let's not do that. And if you get your groceries delivered, you aren't gonna have that problem. Or maybe it's a night out after drinking, having a meal already pre-prepared so that when you're walking past the burger stand, you're already like thinking, okay, I have a meal at home, I can just eat that, I know it'll be better for me, and you won't give in to that temptation. So the goal is to be aware of these cues so that you can create the environment to support you. So to summarize all of this, right, stick to an 80% sustainable diet, be flexible, don't be perfect, make your meals enjoyable, sleep like your life depends on it, identify your behavioral triggers and cues. It's not about willpower, consistency is about a system. Cheers.